see that okay? Is that going to work for you guys? See it? Yeah, you can try turning off the light. Boy, I'm looking out. Oh, now I can't see your smiling faces.
Probably better leave the light on.
Or maybe you can't see me as well. Maybe that'll be good too. So,
We can still see when the print goes up, I think.
yeah, we'll see here. Well, let's try it.
There you go.
How's that? Can you see that okay? Okay. Well, it is nice for a nervous speaker to see smiles, so, I mean, even if later you fall asleep, just make sure there's a smile on your face. It'll make me feel better anyway. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Thank you for the many things that we've already heard and experienced this morning. Praise to you for that. And I just pray that you be with me as I'm speaking. Help me to say words that are in your thoughts. In your name, amen. This morning, I'm going to be doing something that I've never done before. I think maybe my first sermon might have been in this church when we first started. It was when Pastor Cerns, when we started our church, there was about 8 families or so, something like that. And when he started our church, for preaching, everyone was on the list. So you were on the list unless you told him that you couldn't be on the list. And if you told him that, then he'd put you on the list next quarter. So everybody was on the list. You want me to move it sideways? Oh, okay, because my wife wants to see. How's that, honey? Okay. And so, in all my preaching, I've never done a part 2 to a sermon. So I thought I would try doing a part 2. Now it's a part 2 to a sermon I did a while ago. So I thought maybe we could have a refresher on that, what that sermon was. And that sermon was about a hike Anthony and I did, my son, did about 2 summers ago. And if you'll remember, if you heard my sermon, that we went on this hike. It was supposed to be a 74-mile hike from Stevens Pass to Snoqualmie Pass. But halfway through, there was a big storm, and we ended up not being able to complete our hike. But along the way, I learned a lot of lessons that applied to our spiritual lives. And so that's what my sermon was about. And so I'm going to quickly go through some of those lessons. So this is a review of part 1. Important lesson number 1. Christianity is not about theory, it's about an experience. Now, we talked about if all you did was read about Christianity and talked about Christianity, that you would be what I called an armchair Christian. Because Christianity is about an experience, not about theory. If you think about things like faith and loving your neighbor, is that theory or an experience? It's an experience. James 1:22, but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. See, if all we do is talk about Christianity and read about Christianity, if that's all we do, we're deceiving ourselves. Okay. I just had to put up that picture. Okay, for all you parents with little kids, 1 year. Let's see, where's Anthony right now? Right over there. Look at Anthony now. Look at Anthony a year ago. Okay.
2 years ago, wasn't this?
About a year and a half.
Okay.
Yep, year and a half ago. Anyway, I thought I'd throw that in there.
Just about a foot shorter there.
Okay, important lesson number 2. In your Christian life, are you more tired than hungry? And the example I had was my first day on the hike. It was 12 miles. And when I got to camp, I was exhausted. Now, was I hungry? I was hungry. But I was more tired than hungry. I made supper, I looked at it, and I said, I don't think I can do this. Because I was so tired. So, in your Christian life, are you more tired than hungry? Do the cares of this life, some of them because of your choices, maybe some of them not, do they leave you more tired than hungry? Are you hungry for the bread of life? John 6:35, and Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and who believes in me shall never thirst. This was some of the pretty hiking we did here. That was me being tired. I wasn't faking it. Okay, difficult ford ahead. Important lesson number 3. In your Christian walk, worrying about troubles doesn't get you over them. I talked about a stream crossing that was kind of notorious for being difficult. I had planned my whole hike when I was going hiking around this stream so that the water would hopefully be low. And when I got there, it wasn't that bad. Do we take Hebrews 13:5 to heart? For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Do we have worries that we need to give to God? Matthew 6:34, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Leave the worries behind and press forward. Some of the trail. Important lesson number 4. The Christian path might be a narrow path, but it's a good path. You know, like on my son and I's hike, if you think about it, the trail is very narrow, maybe only 2 feet wide. And if you're on that trail, if you think about it, you have more options off trail than on trail. You could go any direction you wanted to go. So why is it that you go on a trail? Why, when I want to go to a lake, at the trailhead, do I just get my compass out and say, I'm going to go straight there? Over rocks and boulders and through brush and thorns. Why don't you do that? It's because the path is the better way to go. It gets you there in better shape without scratches. You know, the trail can be restrictive. It restricts you to a very narrow path, but it's a good path. The Christian life is the same. It can be narrow at times, but it's a good path. And it's usually the best path to get you to where you want to go. Matthew 7:13. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it. We had some beautiful scenery along the way. This was about an hour before it started raining. It looked pretty right now. But in about an hour it was raining, and in about an hour and a half it was really raining with lightning and thunder. And in about 2 hours from this picture it was hailing, maybe marble-sized hail. and it rained and hailed for 10 hours. We didn't see that coming. And because of that, and hearing that the forecast was the same for the next several days, and that we were going to be hiking up on top of a ridge for a while, Anthony and I decided to quit our hike and hike out. Important lesson number 5. The goal of the Christian life is not a destination, but it's a reunion. We didn't finish our hike, but when we got to Cleellum, Ella was there. And so we hadn't finished our hike, but it was a good reunion. You know, when we think of heaven, do we think of mansions or gold streets? You know, this text talks about mansions and golden streets. Some of us might think of getting rid of hardship. But the real thing about getting to heaven will be a reunion. You know, because there's mansions here on this earth. We don't need to be in heaven to have mansions. But in heaven, there'll be the person who saved us. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself. And this is the part, that where I am, there you may be also. So our goal in the Christian walk is a reunion. Okay. That was a 5-minute summary of my previous sermon. So now for the real sermon. Okay, I just wanted to show you this picture again, and I'll show you, this is the whole Pacific Crest Trail, California, Oregon, and Washington, and I wanted to show you what part that Anthony and I last summer were going to do. From about there to about there. Okay. I know it doesn't seem like much, but it is actually a long ways. It's about 75 miles. So we decided to hike from 30 miles south of Snoqualmie Pass to Waptus Lake, which is where we ended our hike the previous summer. And here is us packing food. And no, we didn't live on Rice Krispie treats and M&Ms and pretzels. These are the snacks. These aren't the regular meals. Okay. So this is us on August 9 it's called Tacoma Pass. It's just a gravel road south of Snoqualmie Pass as we're getting ready to go. Our first destination was 30 miles away, which was Snoqualmie Pass, and we were going to do that in 2 days. So the big question is, could we do 2 15-mile days in a row? We had perfect weather. I look unhappy?
Yeah.
No, I was feeling good right there. You see these all along the trail. It was actually a nice part of the trail because there's very few people there. I like this picture. These are for people that are through hiking. So make sure they know where they are. This is actually, it was left there by a trail angel. It's somebody that helps to take care of, or does kind things to through hikers. Last summer was a dry year, so there were places that there should have been, normally there would be water, but there wasn't, and so somebody had packed in water and left it beside the trail for people that needed water. So that's me resting for a little bit. And finally we get to our first campsite. And this is me sending a text message to my wife. I had this nice device that even without cell coverage I could communicate with her. We got there about 4 o'clock, and we felt really good actually. And so I guess one of my questions is that this year I had hiked 15 miles and felt great at the end. So what made the difference between the previous year and this year? And I'll say there's 2 reasons. And the second one I'll talk about later. But the first reason actually started 8 months previous to this. The previous January, so a little over a year ago, Anthony decided that he was going to exercise and to be in a triathlon. And like most things with fathers, it's like a whirlpool. When it starts, you're on the outside and you think you have nothing to do with it. But before you know it, you're actually spinning around in the center of this thing. And that's the way it was with me. Because I couldn't send Anthony to the gym by himself. 12-year-old kid, I couldn't do that. So I had to go with him. But I thought, well, I'll get in shape, maybe I'll lose some weight or something like that. But it ended up being a lot more than that, because they had a coach. His name was Dave. And Dave had hundreds of ways to inflict pain on me. It was an hour, and every time when I was done, I considered it a, how do you say it? I progressed. I could tell I was progressing when I was done. I didn't feel like I was going to throw up. I felt like it was getting stronger there. But we exercised like this 3 times a week for 5 months. And was it always fun? No, it wasn't always fun. A lot of times it was fun, but not always. But did it make a difference? And I would say you bet it did. Because I did lose a little bit of weight, and the fact that I could hike 15 miles and not be that tired compared to the previous year, it made a big difference. Matter of fact, this whole trip, I was never, ever, even though we had much harder days than the previous year, I was never as tired like I had been. So, what did I learn from this? Important lesson number 6. You don't exercise for today, you exercise today for tomorrow. 1 Corinthians 9, 26 and 27. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty, thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest, when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. When we read the Bible, maybe have devotions, maybe talk to others about God, maybe go to prayer nights. We always like people at prayer nights. You could say those are exercises. Now, are those good in the moment? I think they are. I mean, I enjoy all of those things. I think maybe you could say like studying the Bible every day is like grabbing a tool that you can use for that day. But sometimes the tool that you have for that day doesn't seem to be appropriate or doesn't work for what you're doing that day. Sometimes maybe even you might think that you're going through the motions. But those texts that you read, And that time you spend with God is growing your relationship with Him and also your knowledge. Now, you might not need that day, or that week, or that month, or maybe even that year. But there will come a day when you will need it. Maybe you're going through trials or discouragement. Sometimes exercise, spiritual exercise, done today is for tomorrow. So, the next day we hiked again, and beautiful day, beautiful scenery, and we eventually were coming down into Snoqualmie Pass. And so we had done that 30 miles in 2 days. When we came down into Snoqualmie Pass, what do you think the first thing we did was? Eat. That's right. We pretty much just went straight to the restaurant there and ordered a nice big meal and ate. And what do you think the second thing we did was?
Call your wife.
That's true, I did call my wife. No, we ate again. Right by the gas station, there's this little trailer. It's called the Aardvark, I think, something like that. It actually has very good food. I would strongly suggest that you eat there sometime. It has vegetarian stuff too. But for some reason, after we already ate, we went to the Aardvark and ate again. And then after that, we went into the gas station because we had to pick up a box. And in the box was more food. See, we were thinking here, why should we carry all of our food the whole way when I can just leave some food at Snoqualmie Pass and pick it up when I get there? So that was really nice. So we picked up our box of food, and the next morning, what do you think we did in the morning? We ate again at the restaurant. We had a nice big breakfast. And who should come walking in to the restaurant when we're eating breakfast? It was my crazy wife. She had driven all the way from Wenatchee. She'd actually called me. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm in the restaurant eating breakfast. Oh, okay. Anyway, she had gone up there with a friend of ours and met us there just for a little bit. It was a very nice meeting. So, but Anthony and I had to keep going. So here we are, hiking up out of Snoqualmie Pass. It was actually really pretty. That section of the trail, I mean, even if you just go for a day hike, is beautiful. Here's Anthony, and we're coming up to a very unique place on the trail. How many of you have been right here? Okay, I know Brandon's been there. It's worth a day hike because it's called the Kindle Catwalk. And just imagine the people that had to blast rock out of this granite to put in this trail. Here you can see the trail goes along there. So anyway, it's an amazing place. It's worth the day hike to go up there. So we kept hiking and we finally got to Ridge Lake. And it was 1 o'clock. And that's where we were planning on camping. And so we decided to swim in the lake and cook a meal. That's our food. It doesn't maybe look real good, but it was really good. It's really good. And we set up our camp. We took a little nap. Anyway, I told you that there was 2 reasons why the hike was physically easier. And the second one was less weight. Okay. The 2 years before, when I had started the hike with Anthony, I was carrying 45 pounds. Now to some, that sounds like a lot, To others, that doesn't sound like very much. Alex back here, he's used to much more than that. However, on this hike, my pack was never more than 25 pounds. And so do you think that made a difference? Oh yeah, you bet it did. So how did I do that? Well, one of the things was, instead of carrying the 5.5-pound tent, I carried a 12-ounce tarp. And it worked great. It even rained that night, and we were perfectly dry. But I would say mostly we didn't carry stuff we didn't need. Whether it was food or clothing, we just didn't take what we didn't need. Now, you say, what difference does that make? Now, I don't want to give these people a hard time, but if you carry too much, there's a chance you won't even make it to your destination. These happen to be our neighbors. They came in later that evening. It was a father and son, and they had a lot of stuff. The son was 15 years old at the time. He was carrying 65 pounds. He was a little bit bigger than Anthony is right now. They had taken all day to go 8 miles. Their plan was to hike from Snoqualmie Pass to Stevens Pass in 7 days. So they had to average 7 miles, or over 10.5 miles a day. And each of them took a 2-man tent. And you can see there's a nice big frying pan there. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah, I mean, just the 15-year-old son was carrying more than Anthony and I combined. The father had taken the other son the previous year, and they didn't make it. And the son said that was because his brother was too weak. Now, the reason I show you this is because the next day his plan was to go to a place called Spectacle Lake. And that's where Anthony and I were headed. It's a little over 10 miles there. And they never got there. We actually never saw them the whole rest of the trip. And so we wondered if they actually never made it. Because, you know, to do it in 7 days, they needed to do so many miles a day, and they weren't doing it. They had too much stuff. But one of the things, too, that I thought of is you might not make it to the end, your destination, but even if you do make it to your destination, do you want it to be all misery? Do you want your burden to be so heavy that it's a burden the whole way? Probably not. Important lesson number 7. What you don't need can hurt you. Hebrews 12:1. It's what Anthony read. Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. In life, if you are carrying too much of a burden, it can be not good. Now, some things you have to carry. Life has burdens. It has joys, it has responsibilities, but it also has burdens. It might be hardships that through no fault of your own, it's a part of your life. Life can be just plain difficult sometimes. Maybe you lose your job. Shane and I know something about that. But just like on my hike, I had to carry some things, but there were some things I didn't have to carry. Are you carrying some things that you don't have to carry? Are you carrying resentments, jealousies, hurt feelings, bad habits? These are things that you don't have to carry. Do you carry around unforgiving spirit for somebody? That can be a heavy one, and you don't have to carry that one. Is your life so busy that that burden takes away from your time with God? Are you always telling people that you're very busy all the time? Are you saying that to God also? Like my hike, sometimes if you carry too much weight, it can actually keep you from getting to your destination. Do you want that? Or do you want to go on your journey and enjoy it and not in misery? So I would say lighten your load. Now some things you can take off yourself, and some things maybe you need help from God. But remember, sometimes what you don't need can hurt you. All right, the next day we head off. Now I was going to point out, I don't know if you remember a picture of my previous hike and the size of my pack and the size of my pack here. It was a lot different. Anyway, we headed off, and this next 10-mile stretch was one of the most beautiful areas. Saw nice creatures along the way, but there was so many big views. You were up on top of this ridge the whole way. Just everywhere you looked was big views. There I am. There's a little lake down there. I mean, you couldn't ask for a prettier day to be hiking. And we also got to see other special things. It's a nice bear. He was actually really close. He was eating berries. He didn't care we were there. He looked at us a little bit. But he was eating berries. He was probably about, I don't know, from here to the parking lot over there. He wasn't very far. And so we sat and watched him for a while. I think I texted Ella saying, "Hey, I'm sitting here watching a bear." Anyway, and then we hiked on, and what do we see down in another little pool? Another bear. But that bear was swimming around in the lake, and then he got out of the lake and he took off running because there was another bear. So we felt pretty lucky. 3 bears in 1 hour. I can't say that that's ever happened with me before. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, so we kept hiking, beautiful views, and we got to this one sign: pack trains cannot pass. And it's a section that's really rocky. And so even though the views were beautiful, hiking across rocks wasn't so enjoyable on your feet. And it just kept going. It was about 4 miles of it, like that. And you can tell here, it's like, where's the trail? Well, you can't keep a trail on rock like that. It just keeps on sliding, so people just go across it. Finally, we ended up getting to Park Lakes, and I get to soak my feet in the cold water. And a couple miles more, and we're looking down at this lake. How many people have seen this lake before? Brandon? Alex should be raising his hand. Ella should be raising her hand.
Spectacle.
This is Spectacle Lake. Ruby, yeah. You guys saw it from a slightly different angle. Oh, yeah, Ben saw this lake. Yeah, this is looking down on it from the trail, and it's just a super beautiful place. Our church went backpacking to Peat Lake, and then we took a day hike up to this lake. So this is setting up camp. I think it's one of the most beautiful lakes in the Cascades. This is our dinner, and no dinner could be complete without butterscotch pudding. So, the one thing that and this was partly from this trip, but mostly from the previous trip, Spectacle Lake I thought was one of the most beautiful lakes. Last year when we were heading south, we would run into through hikers, people that had started in Mexico and were heading to Canada. They were heading north. And I had been to Spectacle before, and so when I would cross paths with them, I'd say, "Oh, did you stay overnight at Spectacle?" And they would say, "I don't know." I'd say, "What do you mean? I mean, you don't know. I mean, it's this big, beautiful lake. You know, it's got this peninsula out there surrounded by big, tall mountains." And they would say, "I'm not sure." And I thought, this is crazy. I mean, and so this is one of the things I packed with me. They're called half-mile maps. And through hikers use these, right, Brandon? Through hikers use these, okay. And I would say, well, on the half-mile maps, it's like mile 2420. And they'd go, "Oh yeah, I remember 2420. Yeah, that was a really nice place." And I thought about that, and I thought that was interesting how they knew 2420. What does 2420, what's that mean to you? Probably nothing. It meant, now those numbers meant a lot to Brandon. 2420. On your half-mile maps, they start on the border of Mexico. And at the border of Mexico, it's mile 0. And when you cross into Canada, on the half-mile map, it says 2660. So, when you're at 2420, you have 240 miles to go to Canada. And, you know, I thought that was interesting how they knew their location based on their destination. Now, I've met some people that when they talk to through hikers, they say, you know, these people are always hiking, always hiking. They never stop and enjoy things. You know, I mean, here's this big, beautiful lake, and they just walk past it. And I kind of have to defend them a little bit, because I tell them, I said, okay, by the time they get up to where you are in Washington, they probably hiked by 1,000 lakes. Like, I don't know, Brandon, like a lot of lakes. I'd have to actually try to figure that out, but it could be 1,000 lakes that they've hiked by. Now, my question for you is, do you remember 1,000 of anything? Okay, do you remember the 1,000 things you did last week? I mean, you can't. And they probably hiked by a lot of lakes that were beautiful. So, the fact that they didn't remember one lake, it shouldn't be so much of a surprise. And I would say, too, that they enjoy things in a different way when they're hiking. They're enjoying things, but just differently. But why don't you think when they're hiking that when they come to a beautiful place, they don't linger? Sit back. Enjoy the views.
Sometimes we do.
Sometimes you do. But if you did that in every place that was enjoyable, they would never make it to Canada. They would never get to Canada before the snow starts, and they couldn't finish their trip. So what does that mean for us? Important lesson number 8. Enjoy the here but don't forget your destination. This is one of my favorite texts in the Bible. Hebrews 11:13-16. It's talking about people of faith. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Are we strangers and pilgrims on the earth? You know, we just talked about burdens and how life has burdens that we have to carry sometimes. And people going through hard times, they often talk about that time when every tear will be wiped away. But there's a lot of good things too. We can wake up every morning with a lot of good things in our lives, a lot of beauty. And I think God wants us to enjoy that. But do we remind ourselves of where we are in relationship to where we're going? Or are the beauties that we have here making us linger? You know, the thru hiker has a daily reminder of how far he's come and how far he has to go. Do we remind ourselves every day of the same? Because if we linger too long, we might not get to where we're going. So, enjoy the here, but don't forget your destination. So, the next day we kept hiking, and some of you remember some of these if you were on the church backpacking trip and took that day hike, some of the pretty things we did. This day was going to be the longest we did. It was going to be 18 miles, and it was going to be climbing about 4,000 feet and going down about 5,300 feet. So here we're starting the uphill, and that's hiking, and here's Anthony at the top. So it's all downhill from here. Here we stopped at Escondido Tarns, just a group of little lakes along the way. And we felt great. It was just a beautiful day. And here we're looking down at Waptus. So this is where it's about 3,000 feet we had to go down and camp for the night. Interesting thing. We came down, we got there at the bottom at a trail junction at about 6 o'clock. It's where two trails cross. And there was this couple standing right at the junction. They weren't technically thru hikers because they had started in southern Oregon. So they had only gone about 800 miles. So their name was Chia and Late Start. And some of you have seen the picture of them before because I did a children's story about them. But I just want to say God works in mysterious ways. Some people say that's all chance, but I wouldn't agree. And I'll tell you a little bit about how God works. Like I said, they started about 2 months earlier and hiked about 800 miles when they got to that junction. Anthony and I had actually seen them when we had eaten that second meal at the aardvark. They were sitting right there. But they didn't go up the PCT like we did. They did an alternate route. They went by some hot springs. And so we did 35 miles and came to that junction. And they did an alternate route and came there. And at 6 o'clock, we both were walking and we came to that one point in the trail. And I'm not exaggerating here. 1 minute later and we would have not met them. But Late Start says, hey, weren't you guys at the aardvark? And we go, yeah, we were. And so we started talking, and they needed to get some water, and we needed to get some water. And so we went down to the creek, and we're getting water. And they ended up camping with us that night. And we just had a really fun time talking. And they said that when they got to Stevens Pass, they couldn't continue. They had to bypass to Stehekin. And they were asking us how they could do that. And I said, well, that's simple. You go through Wenatchee. And I said, what? I mean, you might as well stay with us. And so they ended up staying with us for 5 days. And here they are, we're playing some music. They're very musical. And so we were playing some music. We played games. We went on walks. They're vegan. And so we ended up cooking together and sharing recipes, and we shared, we had a lot of spiritual conversations with them. And they shared about things that were important to them. And when on that Friday, when we had to take them to Stehekin, there were tears because we enjoyed them so much. It wasn't a final parting because we kept in contact with them, and we actually spent part of Christmas. When we went down to California, we spent 2 days at their place at Christmas time. And hopefully that they'll be able to come up and visit here sometime again soon. We talked to them on Skype and everything. I would say that they're very special to our family. And just to think how God arranged that so that 4 people who didn't know each other at all, walking down trails, at that moment we met. Important lesson number 9. Pay attention to the intersections in the road. You know, when I was thinking about chance encounters, I think of Philip. Acts 8:27 and 29. And behold, a man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority, under Candace, the queen of the Ethiopians, who had charge of all her treasury, and had come to Jerusalem to worship, was returning. So here this person from a long ways away came to Jerusalem to worship, and now was going home. And sitting in his chariot, he was reading Isaiah the prophet. Then the Spirit said to Philip, go near and overtake this chariot. Think about this. How much time did Philip have to go near and overtake this chariot? I mean, when I visualize this, I visualize this Ethiopian in a chariot going by. You know, Philip had seconds to decide what he was going to do. And he came near. And that whole area of the world is different because of Philip. How many intersections do we have in our average day? Probably a lot. And I believe God is calling us, like He called Philip, to come close to someone. Now, I know people that they said, I would have never invited total strangers into my house for 5 days. And I would say there are risks to that. But there also are risks in not listening to God's voice. I'm glad that God arranged for us to meet Chi and Late Start. The last day, we got up and we hiked with Chi and Lake Star for a couple miles, and then they continued north on the Pacific Crest Trail. Chi and Lake Star? No, I know, that's not their real names. It's their trail names. Anyway, so we headed out. The trail was very dusty and dirty. And as you can see, I was very interested in going to see my wife for a reunion. Oh, no sound. Oh, you don't need sound. Although you won't hear her screaming. Sorry for that if it was a little too graphic for you guys.
It was G.
It was G, okay. Okay, our last lesson. Important lesson number 10. Our reunion will be a personal one. You know, I talked about the goal of the Christian not being a destination but a reunion. But I wanted to add to that. It's a personal one. You know, there will be a time when Jesus will be standing in front of thousands upon 10,000s and welcoming them into his kingdom. But he will also be the one that puts his arm around you and says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." We'll look into his eyes, and he'll look into our eyes. And we'll see him face to face. First Corinthians 13:12. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, just as I also am known. I can't even imagine that, looking face to face with Jesus. That'll be a great day. I think we have a closing song.
It's 206, verse